Hey beautiful people, hope this finds you well. So we have a really lovely question that is coming from one of our wonderful subscribers over on YouTube, Bridget. And Bridget asks, good morning Shane. Question, is my spirit guide myself inside of me, or is my spirit guide someone else outside of me? The reason I ask is because I found both answers given and conflicting, and I am confused about it now. Thank you. Well, what a wonderful question. Is my spirit guide inside of me, myself inside of me, or is my spirit guide someone else outside of me? The reason I ask is because I find both answers given and conflicting, and I'm now confused about it. Thank you. Absolutely love that question. That is a question that both myself and spirit really can get their teeth into this question. So if you have a burning question about mediumship, holistic mediumship, spirit development, spirit contact, psychic, tarot cards, do feel free to drop comments within the video description, and I will always take a look and weave back, if we haven't covered it already, weave back a video in reply. So let's just widen this so we can kind of really bring some illumination to that answer for you there, Bridget. Let's go back. Some of you may know this story, but I want to take you on a little bit of a journey to weave the answer in a very profound way. Spirit most definitely do. So, and I can feel that in real time. So let's go back to the beginning, okay, or round about the beginning for me. So when I first started to have spirit contact. So 7 years old, picture this if you can. I'm 7 years old. I wake up in the middle of the night, what felt to be the middle of the night, wake up in the middle of the night, and there standing at the end of the bed is a lady as clear as I can see myself in the camera. Okay, so really clear. There she was standing at the end of the bed, and I can remember still to this day how terrified I felt, how terrified I was of this lady standing there, this presence looming at the end of the bed. And I can remember for many years, you know, thinking that I called out for my mum and dad. Actually kind of terrified, I screamed out for my mum and dad. Remember, I was only 7 years old. This, what seemed to be this strange, large, looming presence standing there at the end of the bed. And for many years I felt as if I called out. What I've come to realise in the last few years is, you know, when you're that terrified, it's almost fight, flight, freeze. And I feel that I'd frozen to the spot. So as much as I thought that I called out for my mum and dad, I actually hadn't. Okay, you know, because I was quite miffed up to a few years back why they never come to see us. Okay, you know, we lived in this almost like this 2 up 2 down kind of cottage, and they never checked to see if I was okay. What I'd come to realise is that I was fight, flight, freeze. I was frozen to the spot. So I called out in my head. I was numb to the spot. Okay, and what happened next, I don't have no recollection of it, but my dad does. And what happened was that after some time, the lady just stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. Now, the next morning, and this is what I have no recollection of, but my dad does, is I described this lady in so much detail, he knew exactly who it was. Okay, he knew exactly who it was. And actually, truth be known, it unnerved him, because it turned out to be his mother-in-law, my grandmother, mum's mum, and he never got on with her. And he was thinking, oh my gosh, what is she doing back? What is she doing haunting the house? So the detail was enough for him to absolutely know and identify who it was. Now, when I kind of look back at that, that absolutely was by design. That was absolutely designed to grab my dad's attention in a way to nurture, foster, and nourish this experience within me so it lived within me. Okay, now we can jump through time. Many years later, we are at a psychic fair, myself and dad. Of course, one thing leads to another, and there you do, you find yourself on that path many years later. Of course, none of this is by chance, it is all by design. But here is another important strand, is that we're at this psychic fair, we're wandering around, and this lady approaches dad and says, "Oh, Will, how are you?" They're chatting away, and she turns to me, looks at me, she smiles, takes my hand and says, "You don't remember who I am, do you?" And I went, no. And dad smiled, and dad said to me, "This is Anne." And then she leant forwards, gave me a really big hug, kiss on the cheek, and said, "I used to be your babysitter." And she then went on to say, "I am really not surprised that you have found yourself on this path that you have, because of the conversations we used to have when you were a little boy." So she was babysitting me around that time. And dad went, "My gosh." And he looked at Anne and said, "I never knew that this was a part of your world." She said, "Well, at the time, I don't think I could have told you." So you see, it was all by design. She was a working medium and a psychic artist, and she was my babysitter. Okay, none of those things are by chance. So what I'm really wanting to share here is that when I had contact with my grandmother, she absolutely, I do believe, without a shadow of a doubt, she has become a guide within my life. I am absolutely convinced that I am doing the work I do because of the guidance that I received, the guiding influence, the guiding hand that moved into my world and nurtured that pathway forwards, pulled all the jigsaw pieces together, down to her appearing, down to me having a babysitter that turned out to be a professional psychic medium and psychic artist who, like dad said, Anne would say she had some beautiful conversations with you tonight. Mum and dad would come back in, and then Anne would say, "Oh, I had a lovely conversation with Shane," and dad would think, "Did you?" Because he's not really speaking much to me. So I had these really, I was quite quiet, had these really beautiful conversations. When I look back at that, well, we can see, none of that was by chance, it was by design. These are the important pieces. But, when I kind of think of my grandmother, without a doubt, has turned up at events, like where there's other mediums working, and they often gravitate towards me and they describe her, and these are people that don't know me, and they describe her. Without a doubt, she has been a guide within my life and a guiding influence, but she is outside of me. Okay, so she is outside of me. Then you can kind of like think, well, here's another example. I had a presence appear. Again, quite early on in my journey. I had this presence appear, and I could feel that this was something that I hadn't felt before. Okay, so this was something that I was feeling that I hadn't felt before. I knew it was a female vibration, I knew it was a female energy, I could sense her there. And I remember kind of turning to the presence, some of you will know this beautiful story, turning to the presence and saying, "Who are you and what are you about? Who are you and what are you about?" And her words simply were, "No, Shane, who are you and what are you about?" And I remember really being knocked off my feet with that reply and thinking, my God, that was profound. I did not expect that. So there I was, kind of sensing this presence, leaning in, and I simply said, who are you? What are you about? And the reply that come back, flooding my awareness, where, no, Shane, who are you and what are you about? Profound spirit answering a question with a question. Now, I could then begin to sense her long red hair, green cloak, someone that I know now, okay, someone I know now all these years later to be Bridget. Okay, so here is a little portrait that sits beside my desk. Really stunning psychic artist. Done these beautiful, beautiful prints. And done my original portrait of my guide, who we all these years later believe it to be Bridget, the goddess. So again, this is something that is happening outside of me. This is something that is beyond me. This is something that is on the outside. Okay, so we'll give you the differences, and which is why both answers apply. Then there are times where, when I'm out in nature, when I've been out in the wilderness, when I'm sitting around a fire, when I'm moving across the woodland. Here's another beautiful story with this in mind, which will give you another beautiful answer. Is I can remember one time sitting, and I'd been in the forest for a couple of days, and sitting there by the fire, just watching the flames, the cast kettle, the old gypsy kettle sitting next to the fire, and I look across the woodland, and quite a way across the woodland I see this cloud of movement where the birds have just fleed the tops of the trees, and they've moved off, and they've taken off, and they've flown. And then I think to myself, okay, what's caused that? And then I get a sense of, I know exactly what's caused that. Someone's just entered the top track, the top of the forest, and as they've entered, the birds are then taken flight. They've flown off, and that was like an indicator that someone had moved into the forest. And I thought, well, if they're at the top track and they're walking down to me, that's going to be sort of 15 minutes. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll put the kettle on. We've got a visitor coming. Put the kettle on, put the old cast iron gypsy kettle onto the fire, put a few more logs next to it, 2 cups, tea bag, brilliant. And then round about a quarter of an hour later, the old gypsy kettle's beginning to boil, beginning to whistle, and make her merry noise. I grab the tea towel, grab the cast iron kettle, and look up, start pouring it. As I look up, start pouring it, my dad's come round the corner. Another time, I think it was my uncle. My dad's come round the corner, walking towards me, says hello, and says, "How did you know?" How did you know? How did you know I was coming? And the reason I knew was because the birds had told me, the land, the woodland had told me. And I can remember sitting there kind of thinking, you know, it's a bit surreal, but is it really? Not really, it shouldn't be, but it is. And then feeling this image, this vision of this old tracker, this old woodsman, this old mountain man wrapped in what felt to be rabbit skins, made into a coat, really kind of quite a big coat, and this feeling of what felt to be like an old tracker's hat, big old bushy beard with what felt to be a staff. I remember seeing him very clearly, and this feeling of this almost smile, but smile with the eyes, like there was this cheekiness about him, but a man that was deeply wise. There was huge sense of wisdom to him. And then I remember seeing this log cabin, and then I could feel a waterfall not nearby, not far by, and then there was this sense of that going down, and then there was this large body of water, all these pine trees, and I could smell it. And I remember seeing that image over a period of time, as if the image was showing me the seasons turning and the change, and then the snow would come and you see the log cabin, the man chopping wood outside, and then the sense of him trading with indigenous people, and they felt like First Nation, Native American Indians. And I remember him being taught some of their ways, and this female showing him how to stitch and make boots and clothing, him trading with them, him befriending them, then befriending him really. And I remember kind of seeing all of that very clearly, and it was beautiful, really really beautiful experience. And you know, the fact that this landscape would change as the seasons turn, and this feeling of kind of living a very simple, harmonious life. Now, I felt him as a guide. What I come to recognise was that he was actually an expression of myself. This was a life that was etched onto the soul. Okay, it was a life etched onto the soul, as if it had left its residue, its memories, its experiences, its mark. Okay, and there was another experience I had which was very similar, when I walked across the mountains of Scotland, and long time back, you know, this is like 27 years ago, when I first moved consciously onto this path. Actually, it was the catalyst that took me there in a way, but I remember looking out across these mountains and feeling as if I was walking towards home. Yeah, I'd never been to Scotland ever before. I remember going over this mountain path, down, and then looking across this range and feeling that somewhere over there was a sense of home. And what took a whole huge day to go down and then climb up this valley. And as I'm getting towards the ridge, I'm picking up this feeling of urgency, this feeling of momentum, and feeling really, really emotional, as if I started to feel a sense of urgency, a sense of rush. And as I come up over the ridge, as I come down the other side, there were some dwellings, old remains of stone dwellings, and I remember feeling really emotional, bursting into tears, then sitting there and feeling that I just arrived home. And as I sat there, it was almost as if there was this recording that had been etched into the landscape, because I started to see children running around chasing each other, girls chasing, and then there was this feeling of a lady there wearing this kind of like large kilt, blanket wrapped round her, and she was gathering what felt to be wild heather and thyme, and there was some livestock, and I thought, this is family, and this feeling of real deep belonging, and I remember seeing this kind of image playing out with so much detail, and then kind of feeling this man and him throwing what felt to be a pail of water over his head, and washing his hair. And I felt him for a long time, and you could mistake that to be a spirit guide, but again, it wasn't. It was, I believe, that was another life that was etched onto the soul. But it's like these visions come, but they can feel like as if there's something happening outside of you. They can feel like they're a spirit guide, but actually it is like the memory or the experience etched onto the soul. But it's wisdom, it's knowledge, it's life experience that is there fused into the soul. It's the memories that the soul is carrying, but within it is the wisdom. So it's like your deeper self is then guiding you, but it can feel like a spirit guide, but actually that is you. So I really do feel that both things can happen, and it is just energetically discerning what is what. So that isn't something that you pick apart fast or you pick apart quick. It's something that for me I've picked apart over time, and it is the quality, you know, a bit like another time where this has come through in a dream, having this dream, and there is this sense of walking along a trackway, and I knew I was in Ireland, but I didn't know how I knew. And I'm moving along the trackway, and I'm going back further and further and further in time, because as I move along this trackway, the people that are walking towards me, it's like their clothing changes as if we're going back in time. Some of those people would acknowledge me, some would smile, some would say hello, some would just move past me. And then after a period of time, I move off the trackway into an opening within a hedge, and there's a copse of trees like a grove, and there standing there is a lady holding a blackthorn staff, green cloak, again red hair, but a different person, red hair, pale skin, freckles, and she's gazing up at the moon, and she's almost like muttering, but not in a bad way, but muttering words, and as if she's ushering the moon, as if these were a prayer to the moon. And then I remember kind of waking up from that dream as if I was thrown out of the dream in floods of tears, because I knew I just met an ancestor. I just met one of my ancestors. And I remember one of my medicine teachers who taught us how to make medicine drums. I remember her saying, if you go back far enough, there would be an ancestor that would have sung for you. And I absolutely knew that this, without a doubt, was an ancestor that sung, drummed and prayed for me. In the sense of, it's a bit like when I stand there at the altar, and one of the things that I say, beloved ancestors, I give thanks to those that have come before me and those that are yet to come. As if this ancestor was placing a blessing upon those that are yet to come, those that are going to be here walking a similar medicine path. And I know that I am who I am because of her. I know that she was a medicine woman that walked a medicine path all those years back. Now that again is an experience outside of ourselves. So there is contradiction there, isn't there? There is this, or is it a contradiction? There is this both count, you know, both happen, and it's just us unpicking, and that comes from feeling, knowing and experience. So Bridget, I hope that has helped at some level, and it is about gently, just very gently feeling into what is showing up, unpicking it, unpacking it, and allowing that to come from a place of deep knowing and deep discernment. As always, a heartfelt pleasure, and until next time, keep shining.